All right, everybody. Hey, this is Sugi here with LorcanaCast, and we know that it is a big week because we are going to see Lorcana officially released in just a few days. So we've been building some fun decks here on the Lorcana companion app, which you can get for both Android and iOS devices. So we definitely recommend doing that because, as you can see here, you can build a bunch of decks. Oops, no new cards here yet. You can go through the entire collection of cards. You can take a look at what the cards look like, both standard and foiled. And if you click them, you can use your phone and rotate it around to simulate light cycles on the cards themselves. But we are going to go to decks and then take a look at this Belle ramp that we had shown off on Twitter and just kind of go on and talk a little bit about some of the choices we've made. Now, again, we're not necessarily too worried about the meta of the game or the competitive aspect of the game because the game is not out and there haven't really been any events. So we're just kind of working on building cards or building decks that we think are fun, that have a lot of different lines of play and something you can build hopefully quite easily and then go ahead and take it out to locals and have some fun with it. So let's take a look at this Belle ramp. So the idea is you are using Belle, which is the legendary 4-drop, in order to ramp out and hopefully get into the 8-drop Elsa. So her ability is Deep Freeze. We'll tap this here. When you play this character, exert up to 2 chosen characters. They cannot ready at the start of their next turn. So what's cool about this card is it's a great lore battery. You've got 3 pips of lore. You can shift this up onto another Elsa, which we do have in the deck. So you can see here we've got the 3-drop Elsa Snow Queen. So you should be able to get her online pretty quickly because we have the full ramp package here. And then when you play this Spirit of Winter Elsa, exert up to 2 chosen characters. If they're already exerted, that's fine. You just target 2 chosen characters. You exert them if they're not exerted. And then they cannot ready at the start of the next turn. So that turns off their ability to quest, and it makes them vulnerable if you should choose to challenge them for some odd reason. But this deck really wants to build a quick ramp package to get into your big bodies like Mufasa, who has a 4/6 stat line with 3 pips of lore. You've got Cheif Tui, a 3/6 stat line with 3 pips of lore. You might start to see where this deck is going. Then you also have Ursula, who's a 2/8 with 3 pips of lore, as you could guess. And then you've got Elsa as a 4/6 with 3 pips of lore. So your bigger bodies at the tail end here, you also have a Maleficent, Uninvited, a 3/6 with 3 pips of lore. And then if you happen to get 10 or more cards in your inkwell, your Belle can quest for 5 lore by herself. So this is a fun list. Again, not too worried about the competitive aspect or nature. I've been having some fun playing around with this with my buddies. But let's take a look at the standard deck. So we've got 4 copies of Develop Your Brain. This allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. So it's filtering. You get to control a little bit of what's getting into your hand. It's not a draw card in terms of card advantage where you net a card. It is a replacement card. So when you play Develop Your Brain, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and you replace the Develop Your Brain with one of those 2 cards. So it's when people say card advantage, they're normally talking about like +1, +2. So a card that actually nets card advantage would be Friends on the Other Side. So when you play Friends on the Other Side, you go -1. Then you draw 2 cards. So you +1, so you're at 0. And then you draw a second card, so you're at +1. So you played 1 card, drew 2, so you actually came out with 1 additional card in that exchange. So looking at Develop Your Brain, you come out with no additional cards, but you are able to filter what is in your deck, which means you are able to get the cards into your hand that you need to keep some consistency with this deck. Next up, we have Flounder, a standard turn 1, 2/2 body. Pascal, this is a great tool to put pressure onto your opponent. He has camouflage. While you have another character in play, this character gains evasive. So if your opponent is not running any kind of evasive characters, you can use Pascal to just gain lore pretty effectively, pretty safely. And then once you get into your end game, you can just quest out and win the game. Gramma Tala is your ramp character. So she's a 2-drop, 1/1 stat line with 1 pip of lore. realistically, her ability is what you want. I Will Be With You says when this character is banished, you may put this card into your inkwell face down and exert it. So you can do a couple of things where you use her to quest, you put some pressure on your opponent, and they may challenge her, and they may send her to your inkwell, or you can crash her into something your opponent has already exerted. You banish her manually, like you choose when to banish her, and then you put her into your inkwell to get that ramp package going. Next up, we have the Magic Mirror. Now, there's 2 copies of this. I can hear our friends, Citizens of Lorcana and B Squared, having another argument about this card. So there's only 2 copies because you do want some card draw in the deck. It doesn't need to come out very frequently, but there will be times when you have a lot of ink in your inkwell and you may or may not have a big body to play out. So you're going to use the Magic Mirror to exert, pay 4, and draw a card. And that just gives you more ways to get cards into your hand, more options to see, more things to do, and that way you're not top decking the whole game. 1 jump ahead is our standard ramp tool. I mean, it's very straightforward. You pay 2 ink and you put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and exerted. If you want to sing, you can totally go back here. You can use Gramma Tala to sing the card, and then maybe your opponent will crash into you. Again, most people don't tend to crash into Gramma Tala and banish her. They don't want to feed you, so you're probably just going to have to manually swing her into somebody else, let her, get banished, and then put her into your inkwell. But it's a great combo because you can use her to sing 1 jump, and then eventually you can use her to fill your inkwell up faster. Next up is Ursula's Cauldron. Words are very difficult if you haven't noticed. This is a great item because it allows you to exert this item, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 on the top of your deck and 1 on the bottom. Interestingly enough, you can use this in combination with a lot of things, such as, going back here, 1 jump ahead. So if you happen to get Cauldron online, you can use it to look at the top 2 cards and send arguably the worst card to your inkwell using 1 jump ahead or Detective Mickey. And then you also have characters like Sorcerer Maleficent, who draws a card. You have Develop Your Brain, which allows you to look at the top 2 and then put 1 in your hand, put 1 on the bottom of your deck. You also have Friends on the other side. So Ursula's Cauldron is a great tool to filter your deck. You can constantly use it to put the worst cards of the 2 into your inkwell with your ramp package. You can use it to get rid of cards you don't want to draw. So that way, when you use Maleficent or any kind of draw ability, the Ursula's Cauldron will give you a better draw of 2 options versus just top decking off the top of your deck. Haha, law. So this is, I wouldn't say the best card in the deck, but it really gives you some very nice consistency. There are only 2 copies. I might say we could trade out something to give you a 3rd copy. The only problem is it is not inkable, and you only really need 1. 2 is okay. I never really care to have 2, but having that 1 Cauldron online gives you so much flexibility with all of these different tools that are sending cards to your inkwell or drawing cards into your hand. So you want to see it, but you don't want to see it more than once if at all possible. All right, moving along, we have the Elsa Snow Queen, and honestly, I just have 4 of her in here as a shift target for her bigger 8-drop version. I really only try and use her for a turn X, play the small Elsa, turn Y, shift into the big Elsa. If I don't have the 2-card combo for shifting, I generally just send her into the inkwell, to be very honest. This deck isn't really worried about challenging in the early game. You can challenge later, but your bodies are also so big. You could use Cheif Tui as support to make your smaller bodies bigger. So there's some combo plays here, but generally she's just here as a way to cheat out the bigger Elsa for 2 ink less. Friends on the other side, standard card, you are going to use this to draw 2 cards. It's just one of the best, if not the best, draw card in the game. And you can use the next cards here. You can use Maleficent and Detective Mickey to sing it for free. So it's just a really useful tool in the deck to keep your hand full of options and make sure you're not just top decking the rest of the game. Sorcerer Maleficent is pretty standard. She is a 2/2, draws a card, replaces herself, and you can use her to sing Friends on the Other Side. Detective Mickey, same kind of thing. You play him out, you get a card into your inkwell faster, so you're able to ramp to big numbers, big time. Like you can get into 6 and 7 drops on turn 4 or 5, and then you can use him to sing the Friends on the Other Side. Very, very potent. Belle, this is an interesting one. You don't want to see too many Belle, but you want to see her frequently, so we might put 3 of her in the deck. Right now, 2 feels pretty good. She's a 2/4. Her ability, read a book, states during your turn, you may put an additional card from your hand into your inkwell face down. There have been some questions about this ability, if you can put a non-inkable card into your inkwell. Her effect does not say that you can. It just says you may put an additional card from your hand, which would mean by rules of the game, it has to have the flourish at the top left. But she allows you to dump your hand into your inkwell, and then again, if you have 10 or more cards in your inkwell, she gets +4 lore, which means she can quest for 5. So if you can get 1 of her online, you're able to throw 2 cards into your inkwell per turn on top of any ramp package you've got with Mickey, Gramma Tala, and 1 jump ahead. If she quests for 5, you've gotten so much value out of her, it's not even funny. So I've only got 2 of her because if you mulligan, you can get into her. If you don't, you can use Ursula's Cauldron and Friends on the Other Side. You should be able to draw into her. She's not a critical staple in the deck, so if you don't see her, you don't lose. If you do see her, it helps you win, but she's not the linchpin of the deck, but she's a fun part of the deck. All right, Let It Go is your standard removal. You can sing it, you can cast it, you can send it to the inkwell. Just a really versatile card. You need answers, so you generally want to hold these in your hand until you see a major threat, such as like if you're playing against an opponent and they're playing Stitch Turbo, you want to get rid of the Stitch. If you have a giant evasive character you can't deal with, if they're ramping out to say like a BLT Mickey or, you know, a 7-drop Aladdin, there's so many different targets Let It Go wants to hit. So use it wisely. You don't have a lot of removal, but you do have removal tools to get rid of problems. Next up, we have 1 copy of Maleficent. This one we might put an extra copy in. Your 5 drops are kind of floating around this Let It Go, but you push into 6 ink so quickly that Let It Go is really there just as the removal piece. The Maleficent was here to fill in a slot, to be very honest. She's just a great body. She's a 3/6 with 3 lore. Wow, she's great. She's a 2 cost. I mean, she costs 2 cheaper than Cheif Tui, as we're looking at right here. He has support. So, I mean, like, honestly, it might just be better to put 4 of her in and just drop a Tui to 1, maybe. I like the support on Cheif Tui, and we'll talk about him in a second. But anyways, Maleficent is a 3/6 body with 3 lore. She's a quester. She's a really great tool to get you to 20 lore. That's pretty much why she's in here. Same thing for Mufasa. I mean, he's a 6-drop, 4/6, 3 lore. He's a battery. That's what they're there for. Just big, chunky characters, big willpower, huge lore. The opponent generally cannot challenge and banish them with a single character. They're going to have to swing with 2 or more characters, or swing with a character and then use a damage action like smash or cannons. So you're going to eat up their resources, eat up the cards in their hand, force your opponent to spend ink, and you're just going to keep questing over and over. So we've got 4 of Mufasa. So Cheif Tui is in here for a couple of reasons. One, again, 3/6, 3 lore. The big thing is I like the support on his character, because if, like, normally your opponent doesn't really mess with Detective Mickey. He's a 1/3. He quests for 1. Not a very scary character. If you get Cheif Tui online, you can turn Mickey into a 4/3, which actually starts to get kind of annoying. You can also turn those 3-drop Maleficents in, instead of 2 2s, now they're 5 2s. You can turn your Pascals into 4/1 evasive characters to challenge into Tigger, Goofy, Pongo, Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, so on and so forth. So, like, he gives you this interesting option where he can quest, support another smaller body, and turn them basically into a giant missile. So it works, but again, most of the time you're just questing with these giant batteries to win the game. So it sometimes comes up, it sometimes doesn't. It's just nice to have that opportunity to say, hey, whatever my opponent has on their field, I can potentially challenge them using Cheif Tui. And if you get 2 of him online, okay, that's when things get scary, because you can add +6 to whatever, and then you have whatever answer you need. You can turn your Maleficents from 2/2s into 8/2s. Mickey turns into a 7/3, etc., etc. So that's the reason I like him in here instead of Maleficent. But we could probably switch it around to like 3 Tui and 2 Maleficent, or maybe 3 Maleficent, 2 Tui, one way or the other. But he gets the job done. A very underestimated character. I think you're probably going to see more of him as the game goes on, honestly. Moving along, we have Ursula. So she is a 2/8 body, 3 pips of lore, 7 drop, non-inkable. Her ability is actually really powerful. It says, when you play this character, each opponent loses 1 lore. You may draw a card for each lore lost this way. So we've only got 2 copies of her in the deck, because in single player, she's her body and her lore are really what you're paying for. It's nice that you can snipe a lore out of someone's lore pool and you get to draw a card. She replaces herself. She's not a net 1, but the real power is that 2/8. She's not really going to challenge and manage things on her own, but when you quest with her, 8 willpower is very hard to take off the table, minus hard removal. This character generally needs 3 or more people to challenge into her, and that's a lot of lore denial for your opponent. They're not really going to want to challenge into her, especially if you're in a lore race. But I mean, you can get to 7 ink so consistently in this deck. It feels really good to slap down a 2/8 on turn 5. Your opponent loses a lore, you draw a card, and now they're staring down a massive quester. Like, she is very hard to drop without very specific cards. And I like having that pressure on the board where the opponent has to deal with it. They have to respond. And if they don't, you just kind of win the game. But you don't want to see her frequently. You don't want to see her in your hand early game, because again, she cannot be sent to the inkwell. So she's very much one of those pieces you want to pull later. But if you can get to her by like turn 5, like, go for it. She's nuts. And then the following final card, Elsa, Spirit of Winter. This is obviously one of the most sought after cards, just because Frozen is really popular. But I believe that although this Elsa can be very expensive as an 8-drop non-inkable, shifting her up onto her smaller self at 6 ink is not only extremely possible in this deck, but pretty potent, because although her stat line isn't super great with 4/6, like, her willpower is not great. She can go down to two challenges very quickly. But when you play this character, you can exert up to 2 chosen characters, and they don't ready at the start of their next turn. So you can do a couple things where you lock down your opponent's questers, or you lock down your opponent's challengers that have enough strength to take her down. And that way your opponent either has to commit their entire board to take out 1 Elsa and do nothing, or they're just going to have to kind of let her survive, which they probably shouldn't, because you don't want her to quest twice and get you 6 lore. So it puts the opponent in a really stringy spot. Because if you do this properly and you get her out early, of course, you can lock down a very, very significant size of their board. And now they may or may not really have an answer. And so you can quest with her once safely, quest with her a second time. And now they really have to answer with a couple of their cards, She's a great finisher. If you can get her out when the opponent thinks they're about to win the game, you can lock down 2 of their big lore batteries, denying them the opportunity to win the game, giving you the opportunity to win because now 2 of their big bodies that they want to quest with cannot quest, and then she's safe because she is not exerted on top of what other giant bodies you have. Like, you've got the Ursula at 2/8, you've got the Tui, the Mufasa, the Maleficent, all of them have 6 willpower. They're just monsters to take down. So you can be sitting on this giant wall of, 6, 8, 6, 6, 6. What are they going to do? That's the problem for your opponent to deal with. So yeah, that's the nuts and bolts of the deck. You really aren't trying to worry too much about any one matchup in particular. Like, let's be honest, every deck in the format now has a good matchup, a bad matchup, and an awkward matchup. If I had to take a gander, you're probably going to have issues with evasive because Pascal is your only real option. You don't necessarily want to see Ruby decks because they can run, what's that card in my brain? Be Prepared. So Be Prepared can wipe out your big bodies, and now you're kind of in a bad place because it costs you so much ink to refill your board, and your opponent can just do it so quickly. If you're looking again, if you're sitting across a weenie deck, so like Stitch Turbo or just low bodies to the ground that your opponent is spamming out, they can beat you in the lore race. So you're going to have to challenge. It's okay because your bodies are big enough with your like Mufasa 4/6 and your Maleficent that you can eat some of their small bodies that are usually 1/1s and 2/2s. Unfortunately, you're not questing, but you are turning off their ability to just swing out or quest out, and you can't do anything about it. But all in all, the idea realistically, your big targets are going to be getting 1 jump ahead online early game, getting your Gramma Tala on the board so that you can use her as an accelerant to fill that inkwell, use your Detective Mickey, so that way you're getting that ramp package. You're getting as many cards into the inkwell as possible, and then refill your hand using friends on the other side. You can also use Ursula's Cauldron to filter, so you get better draws over time. And then you want to just put insane amount of pressure on your opponent using Maleficent, Mufasa, Tui, Ursula, Elsa. And then if you get 10 ink, slap down that Belle and go, hey, she can quest for 5. Do you have an answer? And if they don't, let them have it. You probably are going to win the game. So anyways, that is the Belle ramp deck. You're trying to get into that top end as fast as you can. Have a lot of fun. Let us know in the comments what you think, what you like, what you don't like, if you would make any adjustments. And we'll definitely test this deck and see what needs to be tweaked. But so far, this is a lot of fun, and we highly recommend that anyone and everyone who is going to go out to their friendly local game store to play Lorcana just have a great time. There's so much opportunity, so many people to meet, and this game is going to be a lot of fun. So support your friendly local game store. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.